Welcome to the Sports Lunatics bonus show. I feel like I'm on an episode of Match Game, Howie.
You need a long microphone like Gene
I
Rayburn
tell you, we
had.
paid a lot of money for that title. I have a feeling it may not last more than 2 weeks, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
We'll see. Again, part of our we're stepping up our content for the Sports Lunatics. Please check us out at thesportslunatics.com, where you'll get articles, you'll get audio podcast of the show, and of course, you'll get to see our mugs, hopefully, if I can figure out the software, because we're all new to this stuff. But anyways, I'm Shawn Lavigne from Halifax, Nova Scotia.
I'm Howie Mooney from Barrie, Ontario.
Howie, first of all, before we even start, loving the jerseys behind you.
I was inspired. I what can I say?
That's good, even though we're not talking about either one of those players
No, no,
or
no.
teams, but I love the jerseys. Love it. Howie, a couple of things that I wanted to bring up, from the summer, but actually, they've actually been more recent that relates to sports history. Uh, we have this debate. First of all, when you hear about the greatest GOAT debate, no matter what sport, what do you think of? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Are you sick of it? It's
I,
become a very boring
I,
sports
I,
radio topic, to be quite honest.
I've never gotten into the GOAT or the Mount Rushmore kind of things because no matter who you put in, you're leaving somebody out who deserves to be discussed in that same conversation. And so I've never been a fan. I mean, if first of all, if people can make it to whatever major league sport they're playing, they're good. The average career is 3.5 years, I think, for an athlete, for a professional athlete. So anybody that can make it, I give them much respect. Uh, Anybody who can reach the pantheon, the great heights that some of the Hall of Famers reach, that's double or triple or whatever. But in terms of discussions about the greatest of all time, I find that for a lot of people, there's a lot of recency bias. They'll only think about the last great player they saw or the last greatest, in quotes, player they saw, and they will either not know about or they'll forget somebody who played 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that was as good or maybe even better. That's my issue with those kind of discussions.
First of all, we're doing about 30 Mount Rushmore episodes. It was part of my planning. We haven't talked about this. This is what happens, folks. We wing a lot of this stuff from the standpoint of we try to stay relative to what's happening today, but also look back at yesterday, if you know what I
Yeah.
mean. And I actually get a kick out of the Mount Rushmore debate. I totally get what you're saying, though. I do, because there's only four you can pick.
Yes.
When there could be a pool of maybe 10.
I mean, it used to be
Uh,
easy. Hockey used to be easy. It would be
all
uh,
the sports used to be easy,
Howe,
Hal.
Richard, or Gretzky, and then this guy Mario Lemieux came along, and then other people come along,
But
and it's
so here's an example, and we'll get into it in our next topic about the Bruins. And when you pick, franchise teams, three-quarters of the guys I never saw on the list because they were, back in your day. And I don't mean that as a slight.
I'll
I
wave my
never
bony
actually
finger
saw,
at you.
no, but I never saw Bobby Orr actually play a game
Oh,
on television. Yes, I've seen the video, and yes, he's the greatest defenseman of all time, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not putting him on this list I'm going to make today because I never saw him. No, but that's what I'm saying. You can interpret, you can interpret how you want to do these lists.
yeah, of course.
And that's why I'm always fascinated how people do it. And that's why to me, I'm sick of the LeBron Jordan stuff. I really am, like, because you're inundated with that every day. But in other sports, it's how you look at it.
Yeah,
So this is what spurred our first topic in our bonus show, which is Joe Montana came out in Men's Health in an interview and said the GOAT, or the greatest quarterback to him, was Dan Marino, which Marino's always on the top five list. He's always on, you know, he's in between usually 3 and 5 on, depending on who you're speaking with. Tom Brady's usually number one, Montana number two, and then there's always a debate 3, 4, and 5. But Montana said because of his release,
Yes.
the fact that Marino was I'm paraphrasing, but was an unsung hero and honestly did not get the credit he deserved. Again, with those Dolphins teams, you thought they were going to make multiple Super Bowls, especially with Marino at quarterback. They only made it to one. They lost to Montana and the 49ers, and they never got back again.
Did you see the quote? I think it was last night or this morning. I can't remember which, but the from Dan Marino.
Right. And I was going to piggyback on that as well.
Yeah.
But first of all, let's just deal with Montana, because this is coming from
I know,
a guy that played in his era.
Yeah.
Now, some of the comments that I've seen is, well, there's a guy protecting his guy, like his era. Players always protect their era. But Montana's not wrong. If you go back and see the highlights and just see, Dan Marino may have been one of the greatest quarterbacks to make something out of nothing in his later years, especially. In his early years, they had some good players.
What Montana said as well, though, that release that he had, the release was so fast, so quick. Yeah. He'd have the ball by his ear and it would be gone, and he could throw it. What Montana said, this is the thing that always struck me about Dan Marino, was that release. That release was otherworldly, and that's what made him so special, I think. And I believe you were going to talk about the quote from Marino.
Well, just in terms of, he felt that a lot of guys, not just him, a lot of guys could have passed for 6,000 yards.
With the rules the way they are now. Yes.
With the rules, with the athletic receivers, with, essentially the quarterbacks were safe.
Yeah.
Or safer. They don't get hit as much. They don't get injured as much. That guys could put up some pretty huge numbers, and in his case, he felt he could put up 6,000, no problem. He's not lying, because if you put him in front of a really good offensive line, which he had in Miami, he had a good offensive line. The sky's the limit. And again, the game was so much different.
Well, back then there was all kinds of contact between DB and receiver.
Right.
In a much larger window than there is now. Now you can't touch the guy after 5 yards or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
And so, as you said, with the athletic
isn't
receivers.
It funny, though, that now it's all about the mobile quarterback, that, they want a quarterback that can scramble, get out of the pocket. Whereas Marino, took his 5 and 8 step dropbacks and fired the ball, or
he was
in some cases 3, boom, gone. Like, he couldn't be touched.
He was as classic a drop back quarterback as there ever was. But as you said, the ball was gone in a second and a half.
Yeah, and people forget just how good he was. Go to YouTube and see some of the throws that he has made in his career. And but he wasn't on great Miami teams. They could never find a good running back to help him, or a running game per se.
Right.
Of course, at the end of his career, they just didn't have great teams. They would make it to the playoffs, but then they'd fizzle out early. And he even said, he got to the Super Bowl in his second year, and he's like, I'm going to get to tons, man. Because at the time they had a really good team.
Yeah.
Clayton, Duper, that receiving core.
Yes.
They had their offensive line was great. Um, their defense was pretty good, and it just, for whatever reason, and it wasn't like they didn't have good coaching. They had Don Shula, then Jimmy Johnson, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, it
But
is.
it's
It's
you
hard
know
to win. It comes down to this. It's hard to win. It's hard to win. It's hard to win at all.
right.
It's just hard. And you hear guys talking about that in the National Football League. It's hard to win games. It is hard to win games, but teams do it. Guys do it, and collections of guys do it. As you said, without that running game, though, they didn't have the balance that could fool opposing defenses. He had the arm to do it, but he did. They didn't. The offensive schemes and the offensive teams, the way they were set up in Miami, just didn't. They couldn't have enough.
So I'm going to ask the dreaded sports radio question: Who's the goat, Howie? Who's your goat?
Uh, you know, it's really, really hard because there are so many great quarterbacks. Um, and I try to defer to people who know more than me. And a guy like Upton Bell, whose father was Bert Bell, he was a commissioner, one of the first commissioner, I think, of the National Football League in terms of that position. Upton is a radio giant in Boston now, but he's held every position in a football team that a man can hold. I mean, he was a part owner, I think, in the USFL. But he was a GM in assistant GM and GM in Baltimore when they had the Colts. He for him, and he's up there in age now, but he says Johnny Unitas is the GOAT, and I have no argument with Upton Bell about that.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like that's what I mean. Like I've seen video of all this
Mm-hmm.
of Johnny Unitas documentaries. Otto Graham you can throw in there. People forget how great Fran Tarkington was.
Oh, you want to talk about a guy with mobility?
Well, that's what I
Fran
mean. Like
Tarkenton was the original.
that's right. But nobody talks about him anymore. This is what our show
Mm-hmm.
is about. Like we
Yep.
want to educate people who may have never seen these players play, or the ones that have, to remember those great moments and those great players of that time and that era.
Yeah.
But you know, unfortunately, we're programmed now in media to just think about literally the last 10 years. And suddenly everybody in the last 10 years deserves to be on the all-time list.
Yes.
Uh, when you forget how great, because the games, the eras and the sports that we talk about, they've all changed. Rules have changed. Coaching philosophies have changed. We just talked about hockey in our show earlier this week about the dead puck era, and then after the lockout, the NHL realized they're killing themselves because
Yeah.
the games were super boring,
Yeah.
and they had to change the rules to make it more exciting. We're seeing it
Well,
in
no, what they had to do
baseball.
was enforce the rules as they were written, and they clamped down on the hooking and the interference that was going on in that dead puck era.
No, and that's true. And the other thing is, I just wanted to mention baseball. Look how much more exciting baseball is this year, and what we're watching, and the fans are enjoying it. They're coming back. The TV numbers are up. You know, there were some drastic changes. Some we've liked, some we've hated, but it's working, or it seems to be working.
Yeah, well, it's working for
And
some guys. Some guys are thriving under the new pitch
right,
clock and everything else, and the fact that there's no shift anymore. I think of a
right,
guy like Corey Seager, who is able now. I think his average has gone up 30 points because there aren't three guys on his dead pole side that all the time anymore. Uh, you
yes,
know, guys like guys like Alec Manoah, it's hurt them because
right.
they've taken a lot. He always took a lot of time between pitches, and he can't do that anymore. And I think that's kind of caused not confusion in his own mind, but it certainly affected the way that his performance has gone.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've gotten off topic a little bit, but going back to the dead puck era, what happened after that? Um, if you were over 35, you were pretty much out of the league because you were slow,
If you
and
couldn't skate, if you couldn't skate well enough, you were
you're
pretty much
out.
done. Yeah,
You're out. You were considered a pylon and a waste of space.
yeah.
Uh, because younger guys are blown by you, and that's sort of what. But it was more exciting. Like we enjoyed it. Like I remember coming out of that work stoppage and working at XM Radio, and just there was a renewed interest. There was an excitement.
But there was
Um,
a period of time too, a transition period where guys had to relearn how they played hockey.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. You're listening to the Sports Lunatics bonus show. It's a lot like Match Game. No, actually, it has nothing to do with Match Game. Um, but Shawn, Lavigne in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Howie Mooney here in Barrie, Ontario.
And again, check us out at thesportslunatics.com. And we're also working on a YouTube channel. And we will talk again about Howie's books coming up really quick. But Howie, the last topic I want to deal with, the Boston Bruins are turning 100 this year in terms of their franchise, and they just released this past week their historic 100, a list of the greatest 100 Bruins, which was compiled by a host of people, broadcasters, media, and some selected franchise past players, executives, what have you. Uh, so, just curious. It's an interesting list.
It is
Uh,
an interesting list.
and again, you forget the great history of this franchise. And, some of the names, I'm like, who are these guys? Well, they played in the 30s, the 40s, and I don't know if you know this, I wasn't around. I wasn't even a twinkle in my parents' eyes at that point. You were. No, I'm kidding.
Don't make me wave my bony finger at you.
I know, I know. But again, I was thinking, okay, well, who would be on if you had a goalie, two defense, if you want to go three forwards to make it easy, or you can split it left wing, center, right wing. Go ahead. The floor is yours.
For the Bruins,
Yes.
Jerry Cheevers in goal.
Okay.
Um, in terms of a big game goalie, I always thought Jerry Cheevers. I hated Jerry Cheevers, but I always thought that for one, he was a great big game goalie. He was a great clutch goalie. When things were on the line, he would be the guy. Now, I know too that he had the tendency to when his team was running up the score on other teams to kind of zone out. And I remember reading that. I can't remember if it was in his book or in another book, but he had the tendency to kind of zone out sometimes, and so instead of winning games 7-0, they'd win games 7-3 or something. But when it came time, Grant Fuhr was like this too. When it came time, when everything was on the line, Jerry Cheevers was fantastic. On defense, I always look at defensemen in pairs,
Yes.
and when Bobby Orr was great, his defense partner was Gary Doak or Dallas Smith, one or the other. And so you had him thriving with a guy like Dallas Smith on his other side. Now, I wouldn't put the pair in. I mean, because if you're doing one of these things, it's kind of ceremonial. But I mean, Bobby Orr and Ray Bourque, right? I mean, how can you go any other way for Boston for defense?
Well,
At
you
center,
could. You could.
okay,
I'll
tell me how you could.
I'll tease it later. You go.
Okay. Phil Esposito at center.
Yeah.
And I love that line. Esposito, Hodge, and Cashman. I mean, yeah, there have been Rick Middleton, could be up there,
Yes.
somebody like that. But if I'm going to pick, for me, it's going to be Esposito, Hodge, and Cashman. I mean, those were the Bruins of my childhood. Those were the Bruins as a Montreal Canadiens fan, I hated, but they scared me the most. And but yeah, as a Habs fan, we tend to respect our opponents as well, especially the guys who can beat us.
Great list. And I like your logic. I would say you're missing one particular
I
person out
I
of that
absolutely
list.
I absolutely understand what you're saying.
Well, I agree with Busick and I agree with Espo. Of course,
Yeah.
that's a slam dunk in my books. You can't go wrong with Cam Neely.
No. You're absolutely right.
And that's what I love about this. Again,
Yeah.
it's how you and you got to watch these guys. You got to
Yes.
watch those teams where I never got
Yes.
to watch those teams.
No, you're right.
But to me, Cam Neely was the ultimate hockey player that you wanted on your team.
Yes.
And he was tough, but man, could he score. And, when you can score 50 goals in 49 games, which he did in 93, 94,
Yeah.
and just bring the grit and the passion to the ice the way he did, it's just a damn shame that his career was cut so short.
Yes.
And it's funny. I know last year they had a record-breaking regular season, then flamed out, but he wears it as an executive as well. Like it's crazy, and you can understand why guys would go through a wall for him.
Oh yeah. And I think it would be harder to sit up in the press box and watch as opposed to just being on
Oh,
the ice and being able to have an effect on the game, personally. But I can remember another guy when I was in high school. One of the guys that I went to high school with and played a little bit of hockey with here and there was Mike Bullard. Mike Bully went on to play the NHL, scored 50 goals for Pittsburgh. But his favorite player when he was, 15, 16, 17 was Peter McNabb. And Peter McNabb was a guy that I think that he would kind of sneaky good. He wouldn't make a first team Bruins team, but he'd be in the conversation.
yeah, absolutely. Now, defense, this is where it gets controversial, Howie.
Okay.
I've heard a rumor Bobby Orr was really good.
Yeah, he was.
I never got to see Bobby Orr play.
I'm sorry for your loss.
I'll be honest, I never really got to see Johnny Busick play much either.
Well, the thing for Bobby Orr, I mean, his window, he was like a comet fleeting across the sky,
Yes.
and his window of time was so short.
Okay, so you can definitely put him. We're going to put Bobby Orr on that list. Ray
Yeah,
Bourque was another selection.
yeah,
But in terms of influencing a game or a series or a team strategy, you have to look at Zdeno Chara.
yeah. Yes, I understand. Zdeno Chara, his evolution as a defenseman seemed to take so long, and I don't mean to say that disparagingly at
No,
all.
you're bang on.
It just seemed he when he broke in with the Islanders, he was a kind of a gong show out there.
He was a prospect.
Exactly.
He was a
He was
prospect, and
he
you
was a
didn't know
prospect that bordered on suspect.
right. Exactly. That's a good one. I like that. It's true though. There was no slam dunk. He was going to be a Hall of Fame defenseman.
No.
And even when he came to Ottawa, you could see the progression.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in Ottawa, obviously, I think it had something to do with coaching. But he seemed to be every year he got better, and you could see how he intimidated the other team. You
Mm-hmm.
could see how he was a force in front of the net. You could see that he was a big man.
Massive. Massive.
Then you put him in Boston, and it just that's where I don't know if you want to call him a superstar, but he was the best defenseman in the league.
Well, the thing too in Boston, he developed a leadership role there,
Right.
and people listened to him. When rookies joined the team, he would take them out for dinner and he would talk to them, and it's like his tone was almost intimidating. But he was a great asset for the Bruins. You're right. I mean, that's the thing about these lists. I mean,
We
for
haven't even talked
me,
about Brad Park, by the way.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
That's what I mean, right? Like if you put together a full team, like
Oh,
if you put together a full roster with four lines and all these guys we're talking about are on that team.
oh,
Yeah. but you can make the argument that if you look at it, depends on the shade of glasses. Mine are tinted. Um, I just I never got to see. I saw Bork play, obviously,
Yeah,
but seeing Chara close up live, when he played with the Senators, you noticed him. You noticed the difference he made on the ice. So it's a great topic. Now the goaltender too. I saw Cheevers, Gilbert, Reggie
Pete Peters.
Lemelin. We were looking at
Pete Peters.
Pete Peters, Andy Moog.
Yes,
But the guy that I always fell in love with was Tim Thomas. Took a Rask too. But Tim
I
Thomas, now again, in a short period of time, Tim Thomas was an elite goaltender.
he
And
was.
he was the
And but
underdog that everybody cheered for.
the rap on Tim Thomas used to be that he had no style. And that used to drive me crazy. It used to drive me crazy because I was a goalie that had no style either. You
Yeah,
know,
but did you stop the puck?
that was the important thing. That was the important thing. I have teammates who loved me, because I did stop the puck for them, I guess. But there are other times where I couldn't find the puck. But,
Right.
I mean, it's like my golf game this year. It's just absolutely sucked. I have no idea where the ball's going off the face of my club, but that's neither here nor there. But Tim Thomas, the rap, when people would get upset or angry or criticize him for having no style, I'd say, shut the heck up, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, because what does it matter if a goalie has style or not if he's stopping the puck? What does it matter if he can get from one side of the crease to the other side of the crease to stop that backdoor play? If he stops it, who cares if he did it stylishly or if he did it, just did it. That used to drive me crazy. But that was Tim Thomas. You're right. In that window of time, about was it 2011
Yeah.
ish? That he was great. He was amazing.
Yeah, he was. And, the end of his career fizzled out, unfortunately, in a different political
Oh
climate as
yeah,
well. There was a
I
lot of
wasn't even.
off the ice stuff and
Yeah.
just how people perceived him and all of that. But it was funny. Just recently on the Spinning Chicklets podcast, they had Tuukka Rask as a guest, which was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic. If you see it or hear it, check it out because it was fantastic. And he talked about Tim and just he was a good guy. Like he enjoyed being a
Yeah.
teammate of his, but just how people perceived him and
Well,
but he made Rask
the
a better
only
player as well.
the issue that I have with Tim Thomas, and you talked about the end of his career and everything like that. The problem with athletic goalies, and Tim Thomas was as athletic a goalie as anybody could ever
Right.
see.
Yeah.
The problem with athletic goalies is that as you get older, your ability to get across the crease, it becomes harder and harder and harder for you to keep up with the speed of the game. Because at that level, I mean, I've played in exhibition games against NHL guys, and we would work our butts off to get the puck down into their end, just to get their puck down into their end. We'd lose
Right.
it, and then
Yeah.
within half a second, they're on a 3-on-1 or a 3-on-0, and I'm thinking like, what do you do? What do you do? Because and these guys are like 40s and 50s,
Yeah.
and they're still able to think the game and move the puck more quickly and more effectively than any of us ever could, even though we think we're okay. They're just so good and so fast.
Yeah, it is wild to see. And again, in that we were talking in those years, the game was getting faster,
Oh
and
yeah.
you know, but that Bruins team in 2010 11, fantastic, coming back, and they caused a riot, or helped
Well,
cause a riot.
and people in Vancouver will hate me for saying this, but that Canucks team was not very likable.
Oh God, no. Oh, if we did a show on, and we could do a bonus show on the most unlikable teams,
Oh
they would be on that list.
yeah, they would be.
There was oh God, I remember covering just that whole playoff run and just yeah. Anywho, uh, Howie, plug your book or your books and the exciting news that's coming up.
The second book, More Crazy Days and Wild Nights, will be coming out end of October-ish, I think, in time for Christmas. It is the follow up to my other book, Crazy Days and Wild Nights, which is available on Amazon, and I think you can get it at a good price right now. It's on at a discount. I don't know how long that's going to last, but check it out. Get it on Amazon. Crazy Days and Wild Nights, and then the new one that will be coming out, More Crazy Days and Wild Nights. Thank you for the opportunity, Shawn.
You're very welcome, considering it's your show. No,
It's
great to
our show. It's
reconnect,
our show.
Howie. We've been off for the summer.
Yeah.
Again, we will have bonus content. We will try to put it out as much as possible. We do have lives outside of the Sports Lunatics that is, taken over the show sometimes, but we're going to be trying to be doing this on a much more consistent basis. Great to connect, Howie.
Great to see you too, Shawnee.
And again, you can listen to the podcast on the Fired Up Network. Check out the sportslunatics.com. We still have our Facebook group page. Please check that out. Lots of great input from people, and keep it coming. And have a great sports day, and we'll see you next week.